Welcome to episode 26 of our reflections through the Psalms, and actually welcome to the third installment of this fabulous Psalm, Psalm 23. Having looked already at the first couple of verses, today I just want to reflect a few thoughts on this third verse. It traditionally reads like this: He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. It has been said that our English translation, "He restores my soul," loses something of the force and the focus of this particular verse. In fact, actual translations, they say, read closer to this: He brings me back, or alternatively, He causes me to repent. Slightly different to what we traditionally know as a kind of "He restores my soul" idea, if you like. Shepherds in Lebanon, of course, know that once a sheep is lost, it tries to hide itself, possibly in a bush or a rock somewhere, in a very insecure and a frightening place, if you like, and inevitably it begins to quiver and bleat. And then the shepherd at that point knows that he only has a matter of time to find that lost sheep before its bleating is heard by less friendly ears, i.e. particular potential predators. When he finds it, however, he recognizes that the sheep is so distressed that oftentimes it's unable to walk, and so he has to pick the sheep up. And as you see that traditional picture of them laying the sheep on their shoulders, he then carries it back. And here is where the translation, if you like, the better translation of this verse really comes into play, because it actually says, as opposed to "He restores my soul," He brings me back, which is an interesting thing because it carries the full weight of this particular verse, as opposed to God simply making me feel better. You know, when you read this psalm, and sometimes I've spoke to folk who say, "Well, He restores my soul," it's another way of saying He makes me feel better when I'm down. He's there for me when I'm going through a tough time. You know, He helps put me back together when I'm feeling pretty busted up. All them things, of course, are very applicable to God, and it's exactly what we all experience wonderfully in times when God's grace does just that. But it's not what this psalm is driving at. It's not looking at someone who's down and fed up, who needs a bit of a pick-me-up. It's not looking at somebody who's a bit broken and needs a bit of mending and fixing. It's looking at someone who's lost. Someone who's actually not a clue where they're going. And the closer metaphor is He brings me back. In other words, God is looking for you and I in a lost place. And He is the one who brings me back, because the full weight of this verse is not, "Oh, God is going to restore your mood and God's going to make you feel better. He's going to help you out in a difficult time." The full weight is this: it's about being found in a place where we are incapable of coming back from, left to ourselves. You get that? It's about being found in a lost and painful place that we are incapable of coming back from if left to ourselves. That's the picture that's being built. So the Good Shepherd is the one who brings me back, who finds me and brings me back. Kenneth Bailey, in his work, says this: unaided, the lost sheep cannot find its way home. As a lost sheep, my only hope is that the Good Shepherd will come after me and hopefully find me, pick me up, carry me back to safety. Just imagine that picture of a sheep wandering from the flock, of a sheep finding some ravine or gully or crevice that it's rooted itself down, only to realize that he's lost all sight of the flock. He's now no idea where he is. What does he do? He looks around and tries to find somewhere safe that at least he can find covering. Once he's done that, what does he do then? The full weight of anxiety begins to hit that sheep. I am lost, and I don't know how I got here, and I have no idea how to get back. It begins to sense heavily its own sense of fear and insecurity. That is expressed through its bleating. And of course, the shepherd knows not only that it's missing, but instinctively can hear that bleating. And then the race is on. He's got to get to that sheep before a potential predator finds it. And if he doesn't, it's all over for that sheep. But once he gets there, which is a momentous feat in itself and an incredible endeavor of inconvenience to the shepherd, if you can imagine, once he finds that sheep, he's then got a second problem, because that sheep is so traumatized it can't move. He can't just whistle his tune, as we talked about in the last episode, and that sheep's going to come running out from that rock, crevice, bush, wherever it's hiding, and just follow him merrily and gaily along. That sheep is petrified. So the shepherd then has to go even further and get into that rock, that crevice, get into that mess, that bush, whether it's a thorny bush, perhaps to his own pain and difficulty, get in there amongst that and dig that sheep out and then lift that sheep and carry it back. Can you see the picture this builds? We get ourselves into some messy places, don't we? Wandering off down crevices, ravines, into rocks and bushes. And sometimes, sadly, it's a long time before we realize, wait a minute, I'm lost here. And I don't know how I got here. That's the mystifying thing often about that, isn't it? You'd like to think you knew exactly how you got it. You know exactly what you did. So now all you've got to do is retrace those steps. You'll be back with everyone in no time at all, back to living and life and happiness and peace. But the reality is, the wandering process, slowly but surely and gradually, incrementally, blinds us from the wisdom of life that we were exercising and living, to the point that by the time we're in a rut, we actually don't know the process that took us there, because it slowly but surely blinded us from seeing life in clarity and peace. It's at that point that perhaps we get the scariest, because now we know that unless someone comes for me, I ain't going to do this. Unless someone helps me, I ain't going to beat this. Unless someone steps in, I'm not going to master this. It's a very lonely, terrifying place to be. I can remember watching one or two documentaries after 9/11 and listening to horrifying tales of individual office workers who at one point, with rubble piled on their legs or parts of their body, realized that unless a fireman found them, they were not going to survive. Unless a colleague or friend heard their voice, they weren't going to survive. It's that horrible place of lostness that says, I cannot do any more than I've done. And the shepherd, David says, finds that sheep, digs down into where it is, into the muck and mire, into the mess, into the mistakes, lifts them out. All of this is doing what the sheep cannot do itself, and then carries it back to a place of normality and peace. It's a fabulous picture of grace on the lookout, on the hunt for us. In the classic Arminian translation of this verse, early 5th century translation, it says this: He brings me from the wrong path to the right path. This is David reflecting on a God. This isn't about, so we have one image of getting lost, when perhaps the sheep's not intending to get lost, and that happens to all of us. We don't set a course for rebellion, an insurrection, and say, I'm just going to do things my way. Of course, that will drive us to a lost place eventually, because our wisdom isn't that wise. Our common sense isn't that common. But actually, this is about also those who willingly and willfully decide to disobey, willingly decide to leave the flock, do their own thing. And so the picture that this passage is building is also saying, he finds me in a wrong path and leads me in a right one. He finds me in a regrettable place and places me on the paths of righteousness. That's the other picture. He takes me out of one way and places me on a contrary way, a different way, a more healthier way. He brings me back from the errors I was doing and refocuses me. And the interesting thing is this: we look at this and our minds, as Christians perhaps, immediately jump to salvation. We say, this is what this verse is all about. I was once a sinner. I was going the wrong way. I was down in a ravine, a bush, a rock, whatever. I was losing it. I cried out. I bleated to God. I realized that I was lost, and he came and saved me. Wonderful picture. But it isn't the full story of this verse, because this verse is talking about sheep who were part of the flock, who knew the life of the flock, who also knew the voice of the shepherd. This is talking about sheep who were part of that community, but through one reason or another, defected, if you like, sometimes accidentally, taking the left when everyone else took a right, most of the time through their own choices. And so this is talking about me and you post-Christianity, not pre-Christian, because most of us understand that, listen, even as a Christian, you develop wrong thinking. Even as a Christian, you have wrong feelings that get cultivated, distorted emotions, selfish ambitions, lustful cravings. A whole host of internal problems are still firing even after we find grace and peace. There's still that sense that can drive us to a very self-centered style of life. And it is only the Good Shepherd that brings us back. It's only the Good Shepherd that finds us in these very lost places. Do you know you can be lost without ever moving? Isn't that an incredible thing? And you find this in Luke, in the parable of the prodigal son, because people look at that parable and say it's about the lost son being found. No, it was about two lost sons. One was found, one was still struggling. The older son was lost and he never left the house. Think about that. There's a lot of us in the house, in ministry, in grace, doing what we do, but we're lost. Our minds and our hearts are elsewhere. These are the kinds of people the Good Shepherd finds. These moments in our lives, whether it's through pride or whether it's through some selfishness, ambition, whether it's through envy and lust, we become a parody of ourselves. A kind of an ugly caricature, if you like, an unrecognizable shadow. Have you ever done that? You ever stopped and looked at yourself in the mirror and thought, who is that person? Because you are well aware that certain actions, habits, choices, decisions are slowly but surely changing you. You're not the person you once were. You haven't moved. You're still with the same people, in the same family, part of the same church, possibly even doing the same ministry, but you're not the same person. You're a shadow of that person. You are a kind of contorted reflection of that person. And them are the people that the Good Shepherd finds. We are equally in a lost place. And that heaviness you feel, it's like the bleating of the sheep when he's in trouble, crying out. And God knows that the race is on to find you. And once he's found you, to then delicately remove you from the web that you and I tangle ourselves in. It is something the shepherd himself must do. And it is costly and it is demanding. When that shepherd starts scanning the countryside and scanning the landscape and finding himself climbing rocks and getting down ravines only for the purpose of finding a lost sheep, you realize what an effort, what an inconvenience the shepherd goes to find that sheep. That's the picture David's finding. And having found that lost sheep, then of course a price must be paid by the shepherd. And that's exactly what he does. And both these are significant actions. The shepherd must inconvenience himself for the benefit and the safety, and in many ways for the longevity of that lost sheep, because it will die and die quickly if the shepherd doesn't find it. You and I can die internally if grace and God doesn't find us. If our hearts continue on a trajectory that's lost, we can quickly find ourselves in a very different place. And so the shepherd knows he cannot trust a lost sheep to find itself and make its own way out of its lostness. He cannot just simply carry on leading his sheep, singing his tune, and expect that wherever that sheep is, he'll come. Now, when I go running, my little dog, my little Jack Russell, always runs with me. And there are parts of the run I get to where I don't have to have him on his lead. He's free to roam, which is the bit he loves the most, because he's just away. And I see him momentarily every 2 or 3 minutes, and then he's off. He's in some woods somewhere, across some field, through a fence, down a load of hedges. But I know when I shout him, he'll come back. As I carry on running, I don't stop running and think, well, I can't see him, better start looking for him. I just carry on my course and shout him. And invariably, 99% of the time, there has been a couple of times when I've lost him, 99% of the time, he appears out of some hedge, over some hill, or through some gully, and there he is. I just have to call him, and I'm confident he will come. Why? I'll tell you why. Because he's got the ability to come back to me. He knows my voice. He knows the gig. He knows what I'm doing. He knows that we're moving. And so he works it out. Clever little thing in some ways. This is not the picture of the sheep. The shepherd does not think, oh, I'll just carry on marching along with the flock. I'll whistle my pipe or play a tune. He'll come right. He knows that sheep is incapable of getting out of a lost place. Once it's gone, once it's away from the flock, once it's out of eyeshot, it cannot make its way back. It hasn't got the necessary skill sets to make it out of the difficult place that it's in. Sheep are powerless in the face of lostness. Think about that. We are powerless in the face of lostness. In the 12-step movement, the first step, they say, to any recovery is powerlessness. It's an understanding that I cannot do this in and of myself. Think about this in all sorts of areas of our lives. As long as we retain the conviction that we can sort ourselves out, we can make life work, we are the masters of our own destiny, all that kind of stuff, we dig ourselves into a bigger lostness than we would do had we surrendered to God and spoke. Now, there's lots of things in your life and my life that we can sort out ourselves. If I get myself in a financial hole, I can probably get advice and dig myself out of it. If I get myself into a physical place of sickness, I can see the right doctors and talk to the right experts and perhaps dig myself out of it. There's lots of things you and I are very, very capable of doing. But listen, there's a part of me and there's a part of you deep within our spirituality, deep within that mystical element of our lives that we cannot fix. It is beyond our ability. There's a place that we can go to in our lostness that we haven't got the essential skill sets to dig ourselves out of. This isn't down to, well, I'm a very assertive person. I can sort myself out, thank you very much. I'm a very well-educated man, or I'm a very gifted woman. I know exactly what I need to do. All credit to you. But listen, don't fool yourself. There is something deep within you that not even you fully understand. And when you drop to that place, it is very difficult to come back from, if at all. This is not talking about a sheep who's just lost its way a little bit, its footing, and needs to kind of just redirect itself. No, this is a sheep that is lost. And true lostness, if you've never been there, it's a frightening place. To feel truly alone, to feel truly clueless as to how you work this out, that's a difficult place. The role of the Good Shepherd is to find, to bring back, and to place on a different course. In his notes, Bailey says this: the open wilderness in the Holy Land often exhibits a maze of faint trails worn by countless flocks of sheep. So you get the picture? As you get onto that open land, there's lots of little footpaths and trails. You get this when you do long walks, and I often like taking walks with some of my guides, my kids. You see trails where other people have created paths in the grass. There's a lot of those, Bailey says, in the Holy Land. The shepherd alone knows which of them trails leads out to the valley, to the next stage of the day's journey, if you like. And he also knows those who rather abruptly end in a dead end, or even worse, end at a cliff edge. It's only the shepherd who knows the multiple various paths that you see around you. Only the shepherd knows where each of those leads. We don't. We can take one that looks nice and find ourselves on the edge of a cliff with no way of getting back. We can take one that just goes on forever and then ends in a dead end. And then we're thinking, why did I go down there? It was all for nothing. But only the shepherd knows which path leads to the next stage in the journey, which path actually is going to enable me to move on from here. He also notes, Bailey, that the shepherd, of course, has his reputation that he cares about actually. He wants to be known as a good shepherd. And so things that he does, he will do correctly. He will do efficiently because he is jealous of his reputation as a good shepherd. It's interesting that the scripture, David says, is this, that if you like, he restores my soul, or he leads me back, he rescues me, he finds me, he leads me in paths of righteousness. And he says, for his own name's sake. There's a lot of things a shepherd will do to protect his own integrity. Actually, he's motivated from that point of his own integrity. and he is insistent. He will not violate that integrity. So he's a good shepherd, and a good shepherd does not lose his sheep. So part of the driving conviction and the driving motivation for a shepherd in the Middle East is that he knows that it's part of who he is. It's integral nature. He is a good shepherd, and he will sort that. Remember when David spoke to Saul and he said, a lion and a bear attacked the sheep and I fought them off. Why did David do that? Not because David said, well, I wanted a large flock. I wanted the credit of my family. I wanted the fame, if you like. No, because something integral to David as a shepherd said that's what he has to do. And a good shepherd does that. That's what he does. So he was doing it partly out of his own nature, his own namesake, his own integrity. And this is where it's driving. Jesus, the good shepherd, comes and rescues us and leads us in paths of righteousness for his own name's sake, because it's who he is. It's who God essentially is. His heart, his nurture, his care, that personal integrity, that validity of God's essential nature. He is a looker. He is a finder. He is a restorer. He is a bringer-backer. He's a connector. He's not someone who leaves us in rocks and crevices bleating. He's not someone who casually walks on believing that somehow we'll rejoin the flock if you just give it enough time. He comes looking. What an encouraging verse this is. He restores my soul, or betterly read, he brings me back. He rescues me. He leads me in paths of righteousness, that moving from a wrong path to a right one, for his name's sake, for his essential character and nature. Let me encourage you to dwell upon some of these thoughts. Be encouraged that even in a very lost place, the shepherd is looking. If you are in a place today where you say, I don't know who I am anymore, God is looking for you. He will not leave you bleating, that groaning inside that you can't express. God hears it. He knows it. And he will find you. He will find you and restore you. God bless you.